inundated with literally hundreds of emails, and the vast majority of them, I'd say 99 to 1, are positive. But the couple that have, expressed concern and said, how can you use that term dictator? We have a Congress. And so as an attorney, there were a number of things that bothered me about this profoundly from the beginning. The first was that, this was a 2,000-plus page bill that was voted on by both houses of Congress, and nobody read it. I mean, I was just flabbergasted that did not get more attention than it did. And it did get, quite a bit, if you remember at the time. But, I thought, how on earth can you vote on something and you have no idea what's in it? The Speaker at the House, of course, at the time, Nancy Pelosi, says, we have to pass it so you can find out what's in it. In my line of work, that's malpractice.
Yeah.
You don't go into a courtroom without knowing the case. If you're a physician, you don't walk into an operating theater without understanding it. I mean, I don't know of a single profession where you would take action without some kind of basic understanding. And so I give credit to the Republicans who at least voted against it. But, and it was a joke. I mean, people were laughing about that. So, it didn't surprise me then that as we have discovered what's in it, what do we discover? Well, it gives nearly plenary authority to the Secretary of Health and Human Services. It creates the Independent Payment Advisory Board, which has the capacity to make decisions about what will be covered and what will not be covered. And this is a group of people that are appointed by the President, completely unaccountable to Congress, much less United States citizens. No idea about the way this was actually going to take place. Well, here we are nearly 5 years later, and we're actually seeing the way, this is rolling out. So, it doesn't surprise me in some respects that we've seen the problems that we have. Millions of people thrown off of their individual insurance policies, unable to get something in the price range that they were expecting, paying 2, 3, 4 times more than they'd been paying in the past. And so, what I was attempting to say in this piece was, this is not a glitch. This is not an accident. If you look historically at top-down statist or collectivist or central planning type thing, this is exactly what happens. And our elected officials should know better, and if they don't know better, then they should cease to be our elected officials.
We're talking to our guest this hour, and we're discussing Obamacare. We appreciate Laura Hollis being with us. She is a professor she at Notre Dame University. You teach business and what else?
I do. There's research professors who are, of course, tenure track, and I am actually a teaching professor, which is not a tenure track position, just to make sure that we're clear on this. And of course, I have to attach the disclaimer that I'm always speaking for myself and not representing my university. But I teach business law at the undergraduate level. I teach courses in entrepreneurship also at the College of Business. And I teach a course every year at the law school, which is looking at entrepreneurship and public policy.
Where can people read this column that you wrote about Obamacare?
People can find my columns either at townhall.com or at thechristianpost.com. And if they just go in there and search for Hollis or We Are Not Subjects, frankly, you could Google it too. Just type in Hollis, We Are Not Subjects, and it will pull up both of those links.
Fella, this law, the Affordable Health Care Law, more commonly known as Obamacare, if we remember back, the Democrats passed this by themselves. It was all Democrats vote in the House and in the Senate. And, of course, Obama signed it because it's his law. So it was a bill that became a law that created what we now know as Obamacare, even against the wishes of a majority of Americans. This was passed. So, sometimes you can blame both parties on something. With this one, though, this is completely the Democrats own it, and this is why they're trying to figure out how they dance around this or deal with this in the face of an upcoming midterm election cycle where it could damage him, especially in some of these Senate races. What do you think about that, Laura? The
Well, that's
political
exactly right.
fallout.
I think it's incumbent upon Republicans who oppose this, who are looking to propose a viable alternative to this, candidates that are looking to unseat people in upcoming races, need to remind Americans to step back and see the whole story. So the fact that, this was dropped on somebody's desk, 36 hours before they were to vote on it, that Americans were overwhelmingly opposed to the little bit they could find out about it. It was passed overwhelmingly with Democratic votes, no Republican votes. And keep in mind that there was a lot of arm twisting, both in the House and in the Senate, for some of the pro-life Democrats that were concerned about it. Bart Stupak, for example, out of Michigan, who did not want to vote for it and lost his seat as a result of having supported it. So, even some Democrats weren't all that keen on it. So then fast forward to August of that year, Tim, and if you remember what happened in the town halls when elected representatives went back to their home districts, and you had, hundreds, sometimes thousands of people that were showing up to these town halls that were irate about what had happened. And then you had really kind of the Tea Party kicked off then, and in the 2010 elections, there was a huge outcry by the electorate. And so they are running terrified of this, and they should run terrified of this. And so conservatives, Republicans, libertarians, free-minded people of all political stripe should be coming out in droves in 2014 to say, okay, maybe you could get away with saying you didn't know what was in it in 2009, as irresponsible as that was. But we do know what's in it now in 2014, and we don't want it. We've seen the millions of people thrown off of their individual policies, and so we have every reason to anticipate. In fact, the Obama administration has admitted as much in pleadings in any number of the dozens of cases that have been filed against the HHS, that the same thing is going to happen when the employer mandate kicks in. And so, what are they doing? We'll delay that till 2015, and now 2016. Now, who do you think's pushing that?
Yeah,
that's
I want to
not
ask you.
even
I want to ask you a
those
question.
running for election in 2014.
Yeah,
that's Hillary Clinton running in 2016.
Exactly. I want to ask you about that part of it. I know you're not a constitutional attorney, but at the same time, how can it seems like to me with the way President Obama is getting the White House white ink, is what I call it, and changing dates of implementation of his own law on his own because he feels like it that morning. You're talking about legislation that has been passed by all Democrats. They put the dates in there. They signed it into law. And now, the way I understand the Constitution, you're supposed to, if you want to amend a law, you go back to the Congress and get them to change the date, and then you sign it if you're the president. You can't just arbitrarily on your own, unilaterally decide I'm going to change dates on a law are the dates not. So how do you do that and then get away with it? Have we entered a sort of a constitutional no man's land because there's nobody stopping him? So I guess he can do it if he wants to, if nobody's going to stop him. And if somebody can stop him, who is it that would be able to stop him from changing the laws on his own without going back through Congress?
Well, you raise an interesting question. And as you noted at the beginning, of course, I don't teach constitutional law. And by all rights, when you're talking about specifics of the interrelationship between the executive branch and the legislative branch, it's probably sensible to talk to a constitutionalist. That said, I think you start from the position that the president's job as the head of the executive branch, as the Constitution says, is to faithfully execute the law. Now, that's a fairly broad statement, and we have to understand that in many instances, Congress writes federal legislation that gives the implementation authority to the executive branch, either individually or through the creation of agencies that are going to be responsible for implementation of the law. And so in some respects, that's historically what's always been it. All right, well, we're going to give this to the Justice Department and Food and Drug Administration, and they're responsible for sort of the daily details. So the Obama administration has been taking the tack that, well, execution of the laws also means you've got to have some flexibility for implementation, and so what the president is doing is well within the range of what's been done in the past. That said, there are constitutional attorneys who are not self-identified conservatives, such as Jonathan Turley, who's a professor and a proclaimed Obama supporter, who's at George Washington University, and he testified just a few weeks ago in front of Congress, and his quote went viral. He said, the president is becoming the kind of president that the Constitution was drafted to protect us against, because it isn't just, flexibility in administration. I mean, there is a pattern here of carving out exemptions for people that the president wants to give favors to, whether you're talking about unions or certain corporations, or we're just going to order the Justice Department not to enforce immigration laws in places where we don't want to. We're going to sue the state of Arizona that's attempting to enforce immigration laws. We're not going to enforce them against people that were brought here as children. Now we're saying, here, this date for this law, that date for that law, and it's clearly political. It's not really about logistics or administrative law. It's we're going to stave this off. We're going to kick the can down the road because we're getting political pressure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, could he have moved the date up? He pushed the date back.
Accelerate it?
Yeah. If he has wide latitude to change dates on laws when they're supposed to be imposed, and you just said it's political, so what he's doing now is making political calculations. How can I push this terrible thing that I've created back so it doesn't hurt Democrats in the upcoming elections? I mean, so I guess my question is, if he can, and again, you're not a constitutional lawyer, but if you can white ink the date of implementation to push it back to 2016 on the employer mandate part, couldn't you have just as easily, I know it would be crazy to do it politically because it would be unpopular, but could you not have pushed the date up for implement? You see my point? Can you just put your own?
Yes, I do, and that's an excellent question, because I think at that point you're running afoul of the law by saying, all right, we've given everybody this many days or months or weeks or years to comply with it. Now we're accelerating that. So the question is twofold. I think the first one is, would he be within his legal rights to do that, as the executive branch? And I think you'd have people that would come back and say, no, because you basically changed the operation of the law. But the difference, I think, here is going to be where you could expect the pushback from. A few moments ago, you said, well, who's going to stop him? Imagine the hue and cry from the electorate, from corporations, from individuals, from insurance companies if they said it goes into effect tomorrow.
Right.
So at that point, both the press, which always takes a white gloves approach with this president, as well as Congress would be forced to step in and do something. But by delaying it, what you've done is you've basically given the people against whom this law will be enforced breathing space. So you can anticipate they won't complain about it. Insurance companies won't complain about having longer to comply with it. Companies won't. Individual citizens won't. So that doesn't put any pressure then on representatives in Congress or the press to cover it. So then it becomes just an esoteric constitutional law question. Who really cares about that? Said sardonically.
Yeah, understand.
We're talking with Laura Hollis. She is an attorney and also a professor at the University of Notre Dame. You can find her columns online at christianpost.com and also townhall.com. Laura, I wanted to ask you about something in this column. As you come to the end, you make a number of points. The president is not a king, and Obama is deceitful. The media is responsible. You even say Ted Cruz was right, and so was Sarah Palin. But I want to get down to this bottom part. Number 6, you say, we are not subjects, therefore the president is not a king. But he's certainly acting very much like he has kingly powers. How do we as American citizens regain, in the face of what's happened, how do we regain our rights as citizens in a situation like this?
We have so much more power than we realize or than we assert. I read a statistic just